You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today, but before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to OklahomaHOF on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. So a huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them. Do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my two pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my two golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Banks, where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other. This episode is brought to you by the Oklahoma State Treasurer Unclaimed Property Division. Oklahoma has more than $1 billion of unclaimed property. Reclaim what's rightfully yours. Visit YourMoney.ok.gov and enter your name to find out if you have lost money from utility deposits, uncashed checks, life insurance policies, or more. If you've got a minute, search for free and visit YourMoney.ok.gov. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. Gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our guest today, who is a former college friend of mine back in the SNU days, Southern Nazarene, down in Bethany, Oklahoma, Mr. Zach Sutton. Zach, thanks for coming in, mate.
Thanks for having me, bro. Honored to be here. Seriously.
I will say, you, of all the people I've interviewed, it's been a while, 6 years now, you're up there with one of the best audio, radio / voices we're going to listen to today.
Well, thank you. I'm flattered.
And people give me a lot of stick for having an accent, but I think people are going to enjoy listening to you speak today. So I'm excited to dive into your story.
They're probably going to think I've got an accent too. So
yeah, definitely. Well, we met at SNU. Music's obviously a huge part of your life. Mm-hmm. And you play piano. Yeah. But let's take it way back, man. Where's the first time you kind of sit in front of a piano, and is music kind of a family thing for you?
It's definitely a family thing. Again, I kind of grew up in a different, I don't want to say era, but it seems like from what I'm seeing and at least some of the people that I know now and people that are younger than me, younger than us, that's not happening as much anymore. And what I mean by that is I grew up they were technically the age of grandparents. So my pop, he was born in 1942. My nan was born in 1948. But they're who I grew up with. I mean, that's who I remember since I was a baby. Yeah. So that's basically mom and dad, So with all that being said, obviously my music taste is going to be a little bit based and a little bit biased. My pop was a big lover of music, and he graduated high school in 1960. So you can imagine you had Elvis, you had all these different pop groups. You had Sam Cooke, you had Ray Charles, and then of course, not long after that, you had the Beatles, you had the Rolling Stones. I mean, you had all this great music. His dad was actually a fiddle player in a Western swing band back in the 30s. So he's always had and always leaned to more of like Bob Wills type of stuff. And they're called Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys, which is what we consider Western swing now.
They're pretty famous for going through Canes at a certain time,
yep.
right?
Yes, yeah. They had a residency there for a long time, and they really, back during the Depression and World War II, they were really healing and helpful for a lot of people, and had dances that kind of the common folk could afford to go to. So I grew up with that music as a child. I mean, I remember one of my first memories is music-wise was listening to Elvis, listening to the Beach Boys, listening to the Everly Brothers, on the cassette. I still had a cassette back in the cassette player back in the 90s. I was born in 94. And so I was 7 years old when I first had my first piano lesson. And I still remember it to this day. I was really big into the military as well as a 7-year-old. So I went to that piano lesson in camouflage pants and a camouflage T-shirt. That hole ripped in one knee from being outside playing, and sat down at the piano and was super nervous, and that's where it kind of started. And as a boy, some stuff like that, some days you want to do it, other days you don't. You don't want to do it. You don't want to practice all the time. You don't want to, you're into it for a while and then you're not. But my nan, my mom, I was homeschooled as well. So that was a lot easier for her to, convince me to practice and kind of, hold me to it to get it done. So that definitely helped. I didn't really grow up with a lot of video games. I had, again, like a World War II game on the computer that I just about wore out the disc playing as a kid. And so growing up, it was pretty much either you go play outside with your friends or practice piano. I mean, so I kind of did that whole deal. And like I said, there were a few times I said, I don't want to do this anymore. Because the piano teacher I took from, I mean, we had to go to competitions, statewide competitions. We had a thing called Guild, where every spring we would have to, as you got older, you'd have to memorize more and more and more, and you'd have to go and play for a different judge that wasn't even her. And I mean, it was a pretty intimidating deal. Yeah. To play several pieces by memory, and then you had to sight read a piece that the judge picked out. And so my teacher was really good. She was a really good music reader. She taught me to read music really well. She did not really play jazz. She didn't play country. She just played a lot of classical stuff mostly, and she played at church, which is not to downplay her at all. But once I got to 11 or 12-ish, I watched a movie called The Sting with Robert Redford and Paul Newman, 1973, I think. And obviously they're great actors, and the movie was cool. But the best part for me was that they took a bunch of Scott Joplin piano pieces, because the movie was set in the 30s. Yeah. So, The Entertainer was kind of a theme in there. And several of the songs that he wrote of ragtime piano. So I was like, man, that sounds like fun. And of course my pop liked that kind of music, and why wouldn't you? Because ragtime led into the Tin Pan Alley, which led into jazz and swing and kind of a fusion of all that. Mm-hmm. And again, into the Western swing area as well. So from that moment on, I was hooked, and I got every piece of music of Scott Joplin's that I could get online or buy at the music store, and took that to my piano teacher and said, hey, I want to play this. Like, I want to play this. You know, I don't want to do this other stuff. I don't want to do the classical stuff. No, none of my friends want to hear that. You know, I don't want to play it. Like, this is what I want to play. And she said, well, I will teach you how to play it, because it's, you know, there's music, written out music. But she said, but you also have to do this other stuff too, while, you know, if you're going to take from me. And so that kind of began this battle of, you know, I'd show up to my next lesson or whatever, and, you know, I'd have the ragtime stuff down. I mean, practically memorized within a few weeks, and, you know, would just kind of piddle through the other stuff. And so I know I caused some heartache for her, because she really wanted me to play classically and all that. But so a few years after that, I'm probably 13, 14 now, and I was starting to go to work with my dad, with my pop, going back and forth to the Sonic drive-ins. That was kind of the family business, franchising Sonics. And so again, I'm listening to his music in the truck and kind of revisiting some of these artists and songs that I remembered as a kid. Elvis, you know, again, the Beach Boys, and so I, you know, was listening, and, you know, a lot of those songs, they've got great piano parts. I mean, I was like, man, I want to play that. You know, who's playing that? Who's doing that? And da 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 da. And so he mentioned, just kind of casually one time, so, you know, a lot of those guys in the studio, especially back then, you know, they weren't using sheet music. They were just playing it by ear, and they'd kind of run through the arrangement and get it and then record it. And, you know, that's it. So I thought, playing by ear, well, I wonder if I could do that. No one had ever really said or mentioned that to me at all. And so I went home and started to take some of those same songs again and listen to them and just try to play them back, play the piano part. And so that introduced me to a pianist named Floyd Kramer, who played, like Patsy Cline's Crazy, you know, the just signature piano intro, you know, known the world over. He played that. He played for Elvis back in the day, pretty much everything Elvis did there in the 60s. He played for the Everly Brothers, for Jim Reeves. He was a session player in Nashville, and who also, he had his own kind of solo career as well. So then I was hooked on his stuff. So then I'm like going to my piano teacher. I'm saying, okay, show me. I want to play this. This is what I want to play, you know. And there was not a lot of music for his stuff, because, again, most of what he was doing in the studio was he was coming up with it either on his own or from a demo he was hearing or you know, whatever. And so about that time I was 14 or 15, and I just kind of said, I don't want to, you know, kind of telling my parents too. It's like, I'm not practicing what she wants. Like, you know, I don't want to do this anymore. She doesn't, she's over it too. And so anyway, that began this whole endeavor for me of trying to, you know, play by ear and teach myself to play by ear and learn songs I liked. And I started playing at church regularly then too, Sunday morning. You know, so you're in the pressure seat at that point, especially from the piano standpoint. We were still doing quite a bit of hymns and gospel stuff back then. And so that led to, I got a call when I was 16 from Jim Graves at SNU. He's the choir teacher for chorale and university singers. And it was just a random, out of the blue. I think it was August, maybe the 1st of September. So right around the same time we're doing this interview, he called me up and he said, hey, our piano player didn't come back this year. And he had several students that were interns at my church leading worship. So I'm playing for them. And so he's going to them looking for a piano player because he needed one. And And this is jazz. I mean, this is straight ahead. You know, he's a jazz guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he likes all types of music, but jazz is his baby. And so he wants it done the right way. And I had never, I mean, I kind of knew it. I had listened to some of it, but I'd never really played it. And so I said, well, I mean, I'll come and meet you and we'll talk and whatever. And, you know, kind of told my parents. And again, I grew up in the Church of the Nazarene. So SNU was, church was in Yukon.
Yeah.
I mean, just a couple miles from the college. So it was always kind of on the periphery of, I might go to college there. Both my parents had gone to college there. And so I went and met with him and kind of hit it off. And so he essentially kind of hired me, except not, because I was 16, about to be 17, to start playing for this college group. And kind of the agreement was that I would get to play for them and get some piano lessons from a jazz guy if I would agree or plan to go to SNU as a student once I was of age. So I just kind of said, well, I mean, it seems like to me God has opened this door. You know, I had already been kind of trying to play some gigs and do some things around town and just kind of cold calling people and places. And I mean, walking up with a little demo CD I'd made and saying, hey, this is who I am. And if you ever need live music, So I started doing that, and it was great. I mean, it was a little bit rocky at first because here I'm coming in to do these jazz tunes, and I'm still kind of playing some of these Floyd Kramer like country licks, and he's just like, oh yeah, stylistically you need to start listening to XYZ. And like I said, I was supposed to have a few lessons, and there's a guy named Josh Hanlon, I believe, out of Dallas, and we were doing them on Skype, and it just kind of puttered out. I mean, I probably had 4 or 5 lessons with him, and learned some stuff. I mean, by all means. But I mean, I can truly say that, especially the jazz stuff and of course the country stuff too. I kind of taught myself all that and just listened to it and figured it out and just practiced a ton. I mean, you understand as a golfer and playing at the collegiate level, I was as a teenager and of course still even after I got to college, I mean, I would spend hours a week, even just in the practice room sometimes. I mean, just playing whatever I wanted to play. Yeah. I mean, just working on not even scales or necessarily technique, but, hey, this song comes to mind. How do I play it? Change the key and, do improvise on it and whatever, plus the stuff I was supposed to learn for Jim and for the college group. So, yeah, it was really wild. Yeah. I mean, it didn't seem like it at the time, but looking back now, for a 17-year-old to start traveling around with a college group and doing that, and even went out of the country. We went to Venezuela on a trip. Oh wow! In May of 2012, and my parents still hadn't even met Jim officially. That's awesome. And so it was fun. I feel like there's not as many stories like that anymore. You remember, hearing about musicians back in the day of, they were playing in the clubs when they were 15 and doing all this kind of stuff. And I got to do some of that. I mean, I played at several bars and casinos while I'm at SNU. And then, the next day I'm playing in chapel and, I'm playing for the Toller brothers. And I mean, I kind of said early on, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to try and hide this. Yeah. Now I'm probably not going to be taking a bunch of pictures and, having drinks sitting around and, guys smoking a cigarette right next to me. Not that I cared, but obviously if someone asks, I say, hey, I'm
violates a lot of school rules.
It did, but I mean, I'm making money.
Yeah, you're working.
This is a job. So after that, we met at some point there.
Yeah. What did you study in school? What was your major?
It was music business.
Okay.
Yeah. And I kind of got the idea too that I wanted to do my pop's business as well.
Yeah.
After.
How many franchises did the family have at the time?
2.
Okay,
Just
so
2.
still 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're learning that side of the business from your pop.
I was working with him, every summer.
Yeah.
Like I said, from about the time I was 13 or 14, and doing a lot of that stuff. So music business seemed like I had some business classes, and then I had, of course, a lot of music classes.
We met in business class for sure. Probably one of Larry Mills's classes. Because I did.
Yeah.
I would have been in the business building a lot for mine when I was in school. So,
that's right.
Yeah, because I'm not musically inclined at all. They give me like the cymbal in the corner once every now and then.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so at this point then, you're doing music business. You obviously know that the family business is sonic, and at some point you were going to take that over. Do you think at some point then that because you knew you were going to take, the sonic business over, you kind of had a fallback, if that makes sense? For sure. Because a lot of people, they're like, never have a plan B, give it, and, for me, for golf, it was the fallback was staying here, and so I wasn't like, golf is my only thing, and that's kind of one of the reasons I look at it too.
Sure.
Because you could have, not worked the summers with, at Sonic with your pop and not had the time and just gone, right. I'm going to be completely selfish and give it all I have and maybe go to Nashville and try and make it as a musician. But as someone who plays piano as a session player, that's very hard to do, and you've got to be very dedicated to do that, right? And then if you strike gold, you find a band, they tour, and you're good to go.
Sure.
But it's very hard to do that. Perfect example I've had on the podcast, a guy named Matthew, who is Luke Combs' bass player.
Okay.
And he was, he struck gold, right? Sure. And he was with a band and blah, blah. But it's very hard to be a session player if you're not the lead person in the band. And so interested to see where your thoughts were during college, what you wanted to do, and then obviously how the music scene in Oklahoma City helped that decision or didn't.
That's a great question. Again, having the sonic in that opportunity, and I still am. I was blessed then. I'm very blessed now to be able to have a day job and have freedom too. We've had the same general managers at both locations, and they have gives me a lot of opportunity and freedom to go and play gigs, kind of whenever I choose or want most of the time. When I was in college, there's a part of it that you never, you look at your father's work and you never really think, I'm going to do it. You might think you want to and you think that'd be great, but it always kind of seems like, he's just so good at it, and it's such a awesome responsibility that, it just probably won't ever happen. And part of it was the same with music too. I mean, like I said, I've done a lot of the cold calling and introducing myself and all that, but there's been a lot of times when, doors were opened for me that I just never expected, or it always seemed like if there was a period of kind of a slump, where I didn't have a lot of gigs, or, next thing I know, I'm getting 2 or 3 calls from totally new people and different people that I've never worked with before. I wanted to be a session player, and I still do. I mean, I enjoy that, honestly, sometimes more than playing live. Part of that now is because I've played live so much. It's funny, being a musician, I really do. I have really always hated attention. I mean, I remember, like, even as a kid, we'd have a recital every year at the piano studio. The whole family comes, everybody's family, every student's family in the piano studio. And it was just always thinking, man, if I could just turn the piano around and just put my back to him, or turn it the other way and just kind of hide behind it and play it. I could play all day, but I don't like to be under the microscope necessarily. And that got better, obviously, with practice and age, but there are still times when I've never done well with it. So again, with the session playing, I did want to go to Nashville for a time. And I don't know, it just, things kind of took off here, for one thing. And I just kind of started getting calls and more steady gigs. And I had done some of the touring, if you will, in college. There was a husband and wife, gospel singers named Blake and Jenna Bowlerjack. And they were driving, all around the country, singing concerts, doing concerts, sometimes random days of the week, but mostly Saturday nights, Sunday mornings, Sunday nights. And they didn't have a sound guy at the time, and so we had to carry around all the sound equipment. So we had to get there, drive however many hours, unload it, set it all up, do a sound check. We might get, if it was a Saturday, we might get spend the night, come back to the church, play the concert Sunday morning, pack it all up, drive to a different church, unload it, set it up, sound check it, do a whole nother show. And then we're going to a hotel and I'm by myself, and it was fun. And they're very dear friends of mine. But after a while, I was kind of thinking, man, this is lonely. If this is what it's like, I can only imagine just that, but tenfold, being in a big tour to a certain extent. And so I just got a taste of that enough. And we had a gospel group too at SNU. I don't know if you remember, but some guys, some friends and I, we had kind of formed our own. And so we were doing that. And that was fun because we're in college and guys. And we had, so you had a roommate and stuff, but it was still a grind. I missed a lot of things at school and a lot of time with friends because I was on the road and working. And obviously I missed some classes too and some homework that didn't get done. But, so I got the taste of that. And so then it's kind of like, I don't really want to tour if I can help it. And that is where I've been, again, so fortunate because I've had just steady gigs. And, again, if there is a slump or if I didn't make as much one month as the next, well, then I've got Sonic. So I've been very, very blessed because there's a lot of musicians that, it's either the gig life or the road life. And sometimes they're still struggling to make ends meet every month. So, the session thing kind of, when I decided to do the Sonic, well, then the problem is, you can't really move. So, now technology has come so far now that, a lot of that stuff I can send it off to whoever and record it kind of on my own time. And, the dream too is, again, looking back at the 50s and 60s where everybody's playing in the studio live together and, there's no click, there's no, it's just pure music and communication and everything's done at the same time and you have to play it perfectly. And, you got Coke sitting on the piano and cigarettes in the ashtray and all that. And that just doesn't exist anymore. Most of the time anymore, it's everybody does it separately or, you bring somebody in later and it's not that it's not still fun and creative. But the real fun is getting to do it live and having that experience while creating a whole new experience. So,
do you think having the Sonic thing in the background and having a job and now you do, that's like I said, the main gig, the main day to day, takes the pressure off music so you can enjoy it more? Because you don't have to make money doing it?
For sure. Yeah, again, kind of along the same lines is I can be a little bit more picky and choosy about which gigs I take and so a lot of my friends or fellow musicians, they've played in like wedding bands. And some of that is good money, but a lot of it is you're 6, 7, 8 hours
Headache.
and it's $300.
Yeah.
And again, I've played some of those gigs, but I've never had to do it.
Yeah.
If I didn't want to do it, I could just say, no, thanks, or I'm already booked. And a lot of times it really was because I was already booked.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been very, very fortunate in that realm.
What's the jazz scene here in Oklahoma City? I got some friends in that scene. I'm trying to find the name. Brian Gorell.
Yeah.
Brian Gorell.
Yeah.
Brian was on the podcast over at UCO Jazz Lab. And then Noah Eng. Do you know Noah?
Yeah, I do.
Noah's a good friend.
Saw him just the other night.
And so those are my two. That is my introduction into jazz in Oklahoma City.
Okay.
Through them. So what's it been like for you? Obviously Brian's a piano player too, right? Noah plays a bit of everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's that been like? And also, I think when I saw you last, it was at we went to Sidecar and you walked in. A couple of months ago now.
Yep.
I was like, I know that guy. What's he doing here?
Yeah.
Sidecar on a Wednesday is a strange crowd.
It is.
There's a lot of people there for a lot of reasons.
Certainly is.
But it's fun to people watch.
It is. Yeah.
People listening to this are going to chuckle at that
because
they know the Sidecar scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was good to catch up. And obviously, there's plenty of live music in Oklahoma City, and people are getting used to it now. But as someone like yourself, what's it like? And do you ever think of opening up your own spot or putting music business together and actually not just being music, but also having a spot as well? Is that an option?
Sure. The jazz scene for me has been good. I mean, it was kind of lately, a lot more so the last few years. It's been a little more hit or miss because I'm playing so much of the Oklahoma Opry, and doing a lot more country stuff and a lot more of kind of duo gigs. So I'm playing for a singer or something like that nature. Now, when I was in college, again, there were several kind of jazz connections to SNU. So, I mean, and I know you saw me, running around there half the time in a suit because I was headed to play for some dinner or, headed to the Cowboy Hall of Fame to play for some event or what. And a lot of that was jazz stuff.
Okay.
The scene itself has gotten a lot better. There are several people that have worked really hard to get it better. There's a keyboard player named Kendrick McKinney, and he's worked really hard to get. There's a place called the 51st Street Speakeasy, and he does a really kind of like a jam session there every Wednesday, and that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of responsibility. And he's really kind of built that up. And so that has been a cool opportunity for people, obviously, to come in and listen to it, but also college students to come and get to play some chops in a venue that's, again, a little more forgiving, kind of more of a jam session and type of deal. Here's a husband and wife that they play there and probably play about every jazz deal. I mean, if they're available, if they're not already booked up. They named Dave and Ray Bowen.
Okay.
And he actually is funny. When he was younger, he used to play country stuff. Played for Stony LaRue and used to play on cruise ships and tour and all that. And now he does jazz pretty much mostly. And then Ray, his wife, she's from Taiwan, and she plays upright bass. And I mean, just smoking player. And so I've played with them several times for, different schools or whatever. And so they have also been pretty pivotal, in my opinion, of kind of leading the way and being the forefront of a lot of these gigs in the rhythm section. And giving the opportunity too for a lot of singers to come and do stuff. So again, I'm not super in the scene. It is Oklahoma City, so everybody does kind of know everybody. I mean, once you get to a certain point, because I'm kind of doing a lot more of the country stuff now is my kind of steady gig at the Opry.
What led to what leads to you going into the Opry and having that opportunity, and then switching from jazz to countryside?
I have to remember.
Because the Oklahoma Opry is sort of coming back around, right? I know I had Darcy Lynn on the podcast last year, and she mentioned she played there as a benefit, I think. Mm-hmm. And so that seems like it's kind of having a resurgence for a great reason. Yeah,
and when you kind of asked earlier about a topic that I definitely would like to hit on too is the Opry for sure. It's such a family friendly place. And, people hear Opry now a lot of times because of whatever reason. And they think, oh, well, if it's not the Grand Ole Opry, then it's not a real Opry. And if it's not a real Opry, like the Grand Ole Opry, then it's probably hokey as a word. Yeah. I'll use that word. Probably not used anymore, but, kind of cheesy. Yeah. Kind of, old people music, which isn't really the case. I mean, we play a lot of classic country. But I mean, Darcy Lynn comes on there. She's doing rock stuff. She's doing songs that she wrote. We hit Oklahoma 3. That's 3 gals that were on The Voice, I believe, here not that long ago. I mean, they're putting their own twist on songs. And so a lot of times too, I think some of the Opry players don't always get their due because it's country and it's 1, 4, 5 chords and in reality it's a lot more than that. So I got into that. I first started playing at an Opry in El Reno. Me and my buddy Nick Phillips, he went to SNU. That's where we became really good friends, and we got together in 2015 and thought we'd write some songs. Kind of had a spark there. And so we wrote a couple we felt good about and decided to take them in the studio. So we went to the studio at SNU and kind of got a band together, and we thought, we need some steel. We need a steel guitar. Mm-hmm. And so I think it was Ken Rosefeld, who's in charge of the recording studio at SNU and teaches a lot of the music business classes. He was my advisor. He mentioned a guy named Dean McCoy, who actually happened to live just a mile from where I lived in Mustang growing up. Oh, wow. Had no idea. So Dean, he does drywall for a living. So I got his number and called him up, and he said, yeah, I can come. I'll probably be a little late because I'm getting off work that day, whatever. And so here he comes to the studio in shorts and a T-shirt, and he's got streaks of white drywall all over his arms and his hands and his legs, and he sets up his pedal steel, and of course then just blows us away and played exactly what we wanted. And he had played at the Oklahoma Opry years ago. I mean, 70s and 80s, and during that time period is when he kind of came up and was doing that. So he had his own little Opry deal out in El Reno. So after he heard me play on the stuff we had recorded, he called me up and said, hey, do you want to come be in the house band there? Which again is a separate deal from the Oklahoma Opry. But again, it being Oklahoma and the music scene, everybody kind of knows everybody. So Dean was really good friends with Terry Scarberry, and Terry and Cindy are the ones that really run the Oklahoma Opry now. Mm-hmm. Terry's a guitar player and one of my very good friends. And so he would need a fill-in sometimes. So he calls Dean, hey, you got anybody that can fill in? Dean says, yeah, go. So I kind of started filling in there. It was around 2016, 17, 18. And then their main guy decided to take some time away. And so now I've been playing there. I mean, I'm playing pretty much every Saturday of the month, either at the Oklahoma Opry, and now there's another Opry in Ada at the McSwain Theater.
Oh, cool.
So I drive down there once a month and play there as well. So that's kind of how that came about. Yeah. And like I said, the Opry is yes, I'm glad that you have heard that it is coming back around, because it is, and they do a lot of great nonprofit things for kids to come in and take music lessons at little to no charge. They also do a Guitars for Vets, which brings in veterans and helps them with PTSD. They learn how to play guitar, and once they complete, a certain amount of classes or lessons or whatever you want to call it, they are given a free guitar through this organization, free acoustic guitar. Yeah. So it's just one of those things that, it really needs to, because like I said, we really do music for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, really anybody would come and be able to enjoy it, and the quality of the musicianship is just incredible. I mean, and we're on the radio, we're on the Wolf every Sunday night. They play Opry shows. So we're working on getting a new building downtown, and that's kind of that's my real steady gig for sure, is doing that.
Well, and it kind of just ties into a lot of things that you like to do, and a great, reason too, right? When you talk about the vets programs, the kids programs, like, it's not just I'm out here playing music for me.
Exactly.
It seems like that's the last thing you're doing. Exactly.
Well, it's really like a family, and again, so Terry, guitar player there. Well, we're working sessions up at the music group studio in Edmond for somebody totally different, not even affiliated to the Opry at all. So, here we're working together, and like I said, it just kind of turns into one big family, and you really get to know people, obviously on a personal level, but musician-wise, and that kind of relationship really just can't be beat by much of anything. I mean, that the camaraderie and just knowing what somebody's going to do musically before they even do it is really special. That's probably my most enjoyable thing about music is when, your buddies, best friends on the side, but then also you go on stage and that correlates into what you're playing, no matter what song. I mean, it's really really impressive and really special. Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people quite understand that that don't play music. They just think, oh, they're really good because they can play the technical stuff and they can do the flashy whatever. And it's really a lot more than that.
Yeah.
It's a communication. It's a bond between people and call and response and answering and communicating while painting this picture, whatever you want to call it.
Music's just a beautiful thing, isn't it? Regardless of what genre of music it is, like all of the great bands, they have figured that connection out.
Sure.
At some point, whether that's a connection between a singer and lead guitarist or pianist or drummer or whatever. Like, you're right. It's when people are truly playing as one and in sync. It's rare, and but it's also rare for you to notice that, because I wouldn't notice it.
Sure.
Because I don't have a music background. But when you're up there and you're like, if I watched you guys play, I'm like, oh yeah, you crushed it. And you're like, yeah, but we crushed it because of this, this, and this. It wouldn't have been the things I would have pointed out.
Sure.
It would have been the fancy stuff that I would point out. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's actually really good. He's talented at this, and then the guitar solo or whatever. To that point, then, who do you like to go see live? Is there anyone you're into seeing live at the moment? Who are you listening to at the moment? Are you still listening to the old classics like you did growing up, or are you listening to anyone new, or is there anyone new right now that is playing the old classic stuff that's kind of coming back?
It's an even more great question. That is the first question is hard, because a lot of the people that I would have liked to see live are no longer living. And when you do music and you're fortunate enough that you're playing all the time, going to a concert isn't necessarily the first thing you want to do. It is for some, but I'm pretty picky and choosy about that. And again, part of that is, and it's really not a musician's fault, but if you don't already like the artist for some reason, you can kind of get a little picky, you know, and a little judgy. And yeah, I'll admit we all do it. Maybe people won't admit that they do, but you know,
backseat quarterbacking.
It's just a it's just a thing. It's
I
part of
golf.
it. I mean, I'm sure. So there's not necessarily any one particular person that I'm just super hot on right now. I like. There's a guy, and answer to the other question. When I'm listening, yes, I'm still listening to a lot of the classics. I mean, I listened to George Jones just today. But I like, again, all varieties. So I listen to a lot of modern stuff. I don't necessarily listen to a lot of modern country. It just kind of depends. There's a guy named Charlie Crockett, who is actually distantly related to Davy Crockett, which is wild. But he's kind of making waves. Not kind of, he is making waves.
Are you going to see him this week?
You know, I didn't know that he was going to be there
because
until
Lou texted me yesterday. He was like, Charlie Crockett's playing on Wednesday.
I saw him summer of 2021 at Jones.
Okay.
And I had just heard his music for the first time the year before. And obviously he's got a really cool, unique voice.
Yeah.
But I love the sound because it is a little more traditional kind of sounding and classic sounding. But it's also kind of fresh. I mean, he's not, he's not just singing kind of what some people call crying in your beer kind of songs or whatever. I mean, he's got some R&B kind of soul stuff in there too, mixed in. So it's just overall, it's just really cool. I'm glad that he's doing well and that's successful.
Yeah.
There's another guy named Zach Top, who's just recently come out, and he's got
beer for breakfast.
Some of that kind of the old school more sound and
I came across my Instagram 2 days ago. So yeah.
So
he looks very old school.
So he's one that I've listened to a bit. I always Vince Gill. Vince Gill will always be good. Obviously his, I guess, heyday, you might call it, was late 80s, 90s. Brad Paisley, I've always liked him too. He's written some very, very witty songs, fun songs. But if I'm listening to country, you know, I'm usually listening to 60s, 70s, or 80s, 90s. I mean, kind of that era.
What some might call real country music, not the stuff that Post Malone's playing today.
Right. Yes. Yes. And again, people like it. That's fine.
Yeah.
But there is a difference.
Yeah.
And I think, again, people don't always recognize that, and again, don't always appreciate some of the talent. Especially, you listen to anything George Strait, some of those albums, and the just killer leads that are, lead guitar and steel and fiddle and piano that are on that stuff is not everybody can do that. I mean, really, they can't. But I've listened to a few Post Malone things too.
Music's got a time, right? It's time for music, certain music. It's fine.
Yeah.
So where you got two Sonics,
mm-hmm.
music's, that's kind of ticking along really nicely. You get to kind of choose your gigs. Where do you see it going? What do you want to do? What's kind of the plan? Do you plan to grow the Sonics, buy more franchises, keep the ones you have? As of today, in sort of fall 2024, what's the not to say what's the plan, but like where
Sure.
Where are you headed?
That's another good question, man. It's funny you bring that up because I'll be 30 in October, and so it definitely has been a year of some reflection too, of looking back and saying, okay, what have I done that I wanted to do, and what have I not done that I kind of would still like to do maybe, and I'm really not sure. I've been, like I said, very fortunate to. I really have not. I talked to a friend the other day, and she said, I a lot of times I'll have like a 5-year plan or kind of goals, and that's what I'm thinking. Well, I've not had ever a 5-year plan or a 5-year goals that it's always just been that, like I said, I believe personally that God has opened doors for me and led me into people's lives, and has continued to do that. And like I said, every time I've kind of think, well, what am I doing? What am I not doing something enough here, or do I need to be doing more of this here, less of this here? I mean, what am I doing wrong? And then, like I said, next thing you know, I get a text or a call or somebody new, and it kind of, at least for me, feels like it kind of moves up a notch. I've got to play for Wanda Jackson. I got to play for Ty England, who used to be he was good friends with Garth Brooks there for a while, and Wade Hayes, Darcy Lynn. I mean, so Sonic-wise, that's my hands are full there with just the two, and that a lot of times is obviously can be a full-time job. So I don't necessarily plan to get any more franchises right now, but the other part of it too is exciting, because again I equate a lot of things and look back at my dad's life. So he graduated high school in 1960. 1961, him and a buddy loaded up I don't even remember what car it was, and moved from Duncan, Oklahoma to California. And he told one of his sisters. He didn't tell his parents, they just kind of loaded up and said, hey, we're going west. And he ended up working for the city of Bakersfield, and was kind of around when, Merle Haggard was kind of starting to get a name and performing around there, and Johnny Cash was doing some stuff around there at the time, and he started working for the city of Bakersfield in the title and deed, and learned about zoning and real estate and all that kind of stuff, and then came back home and got drafted and went to Vietnam. And so, had the military service and experienced that and everything that was, and then came home and went to SNU, and then he got a job at Western Electric, which used to be in that big building that's off of Reno in between Council and Rockwell. Again, totally different from anything he'd done before, and got a leadership position that he didn't even, I think his major in college was psychology.
Oh, wow.
And he never ended up doing anything with that at all, and got this good paying job in a leadership position there, and was there for several years, and bought the house in Mustang that I grew up in, and got fired from that randomly one day. It's like, okay, I got to do something else. So he worked at a refinery for a little bit there, and then got into the Sonics through one of his sisters. Her husband at the time had kind of a partnership group, and they were starting up franchises and such, and so it's just interesting to look back at his life and see where all those other things he did, so again, like working in Sonic, the Sonics that we have, the franchises, we own the land, we own some of the land around them that he bought up, and he just, he knew real estate from this previous experience. He had worked as a kind of a clerk in the military in Vietnam at the base there for the commanding officer. He was kind of the typist and did all that stuff, and so obviously was picked up organization and taking care of business in a sense before he even really had his own business. And then of course learned the leadership stuff working at Western Electric, but he was also one of those guys too that was good with his hands. I mean, could build a storage building, fixed all kinds of stuff at Sonic. And so, I mean, I learned to paint, change electrical ballast, work on pieces of equipment, Sonic bun toasters, grills, fryers, power washing, laid asphalt, cut the grout out of tile and replace the grout and
do everything.
I mean, the list is really endless.
Yeah, a man's man.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that's just not much of a thing anymore. And that's not to say that men aren't men, but of guys that can just kind of look at a problem like that and just go and figure it out. I mean, you just go, oh, okay, well, I need to fix that hole in the wall, so this is what I'm going to get, and then cut it, and then, I mean, he could have been a carpenter if he wanted to be. Yeah. It's kind of basically what I'm saying. He could have had a whole nother job, and so I learned a lot from him. So that's part of what's exciting a little bit is say, okay, I am 30, so what have I done so far in a certain sense, but then also, I don't know what the road looks like ahead. I don't. It's not that I don't necessarily have a plan. I mean, obviously love to get married and have a family someday, and I would like to own some land and have some cows and have a pond I could fish in and stuff like that. But I mean, especially as far as the music stuff goes, it's kind of the way it's always been for me. It's in God's hands. I mean, if He wants me to go somewhere and put me in the right place, He'll do it. He just always has, as far as I'm concerned and feel like so.
Yeah.
So that answers your question.
Yeah. No, you're right. It does. It's great. What leads, obviously, all you remember from a very young age, like you said, your pops was your dad. Like, what leads to that? Like, he's your granddad, right?
Right. So, I mean, they adopted me. Okay.
But before you get into the second question, I want to ask to that is because of you getting adopted by your grandparents at a very young age, the way that you grew up is extremely unique. But also, if I was in your situation and I look at my granddad, like my granddad's my hero, right? Yeah, and I look at my granddad and I'm like, if I would have had that much time, if he would have raised me, my dad did a fantastic job of raising me. Sure. Shout out, love my dad. Right. He's the one that got me into golf and like all that stuff. But I'm just thinking in my head, like, what would have happened if my granddad raised me? And then I put myself in that situation. And I think I was blessed to have such a great grandparents that it would have been really good, would have been really cool. Sure. And, we can never guess or think of where we would end up being. But I think you were just super fortunate to have your grandparents ready to take you at that moment versus you going somewhere else and being raised by a different family. Like the man that you just explained that your granddad was, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you kind of hit the jackpot there.
Oh, I did. Yes. I mean, 100%. And, yeah, I can tell you without a doubt, I mean, that I'm not sure where I would be if that had not been the case. That opened up so many doors for me, and also led to me, wanting to make sure that I honor that legacy and do the best I can, and that's, I mean, I talk about my pop all the time, because my buddy said it best after he died. My buddy Nick said, it's crazy because, first when you're a kid, he's your grandpa, and then he really was your dad, but he was also your best friend. I mean, so I kind of lost 3 in 1 with that. And so, yeah, I'm so grateful for the time we got. Obviously, you always wish would have been more. I mean, being 26 and losing your father figure, your father is wild. But no, they were you know, and it's so funny too, because my mom, you know, she was kind of the more disciplinarian one as far as physically, you know, getting spanked, getting swatted every now and then with a wooden spoon or something. And but he would always be the one if I had done something that kind of just needed to be more understood and like talked to. Okay, you know, hey, this is why we don't do this or say this or whatever. Yeah. He was always the one to do it. And my nan was, she still is, you know, she's pretty strict and regimented and routine. And he was obviously very regimented, for sure. I mean, you know, woke up at the same time every day for pretty much his whole life, and, you know, would have his coffee and go to work and da-da-da-da-da. But, you know, he had kind of lived a life. I mean, moving out to California at such a young age and had kind of blazed a trail, and that's not to say that she didn't live her life, but he was just always a little bit more, understanding of, you know, when I started playing the music and was, you know, playing with different bands, and, you know, come home and say, oh, you know, I played at a bar the other day, or played in this club, or da-da-da-da-da, and it was just kind of like, what's going on? And he was just like, yeah, you know, it's fine. And it was. They both put in and filled my meter exactly the way it needed to be filled. I mean, to the very top in both aspects of, you know, hey, yes, go out and live your life, and you know, don't be afraid and be among people, but also, hey, you know, you were raised a certain way, and you were taught a certain respect for people and for your elders and for authority, and you know, so don't ever forget that either. You know, I remember a prayer my nan always used to say when I was going to bed, you know, and I don't remember the first part of it, you know, but it ended with basically something like, sleep tight and do what's right with all your might. And I've never forgotten that. And so, yes, man, when you say I hit the jackpot, I really did. Yeah. I mean, I've seen, and even some of I have several half siblings, and, you know, their parents have gotten divorced or whatever, and it's been hard. It's been very hard, and that stuff is always hard. So that's just why we always have to do the best we can to take care of other people and each other, and always be aware that you don't know what's going on in someone else's life and what they've experienced. And but yeah, my pop was a man's man. That's for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like, you know, being 26 years old and losing 3 men, basically.
Right.
But I'm sure that there are things that you do every day that make him proud, make your nan proud, mum proud, remind him, you know, the things you do that remind, like that prayer right there. Like, so you're always going to remember that.
Yeah.
And the funny things they do or they don't do, and the strict ways that they are. But
sure.
You know, there's so many life lessons that you can take from that, and good, you know, good and bad. Like, no one's perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it's special, and I think, you know, I don't have to remind you. You know that's how special that is. To have that experience, to have that best friend, to have, you know, a father figure who's fought in world wars, been around the world, you know, and can do so many different things.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're finishing this one up. Where can people find you? Where can people, if, you know, they can hear you play? You know, you got your regular spot at the Opry.
Mm-hmm.
Where, because I will say, people listening, you need to go hear Zach play, because he's very, very, he's humble, and he won't tell you this himself. He's very talented. So where can people come see you?
You're very kind. And then that's the thing. Sometimes it's hard. Is, again, pretty much the Opry is about the most steady.
Okay.
So come to the Oklahoma Opry Saturday night. Show usually starts at 7. We're right now we're in UCO's ACM performance room,
Great town, is
which
it?
is right off the canal. Yeah, right off of Oklahoma Avenue, I believe it is. And then, like I said, too, on the Wolf radio station, I don't quite remember the number. Every Sunday night, they play an Opry show, so of course I'm there a lot. I need to get better at posting gigs and posting where I'm going to be at, and doing the social media stuff. I think I kind of was in that, just right in the middle of the generation that doesn't really mess with it at all, to knows it backwards and forwards, and it's like secondhand nature to them to do it. Where I'm kind of like, oh, well, I should have posted that, and oh, well, I'm at the gig now, and so it's a little late. But I play around town quite a bit at places like O-Bar. It's up on top of the hotel downtown. Play around midnight. Play at a place called Bradford House. I play at Oakdale Baptist Church every Sunday morning. So if you kind of go and look at any of those places and their list of who's performing and who's going to be there, a lot of times that'll be on the list. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Zach Sutton 94. I try to post music stuff, but I'm trying to get better at actually posting when I'm going to be out and playing. And then, of course, I've got 3 records on iTunes and Spotify, and just under my name, Zach Sutton. One's a gospel record, and one's just kind of a mix of a lot of songs that I wrote in college, and then another one is an album I did and finished just a few months before my dad passed away, and it's all songs that were written in the 60s.
Oh, cool.
So some of them weren't necessarily a hit in the 60s, but they were all written during that time period, and it's kind of an eclectic mix of R&B, soul, and of course country and western, and that's called Back in '65. So yeah,
cool, dude. That's awesome. For people listening, I'll put the link to your Instagram and Facebook. For people can watch you,
sure,
and Spotify as well. You can go listen to you. Last thing, where are the Sonics at, so people can come and get a cherry limeade from you, whatever it is their Sonic drink of choices.
Come on. Well, for the city folks around here, it might be a little bit out of the way, but one store's in Chickasha and the other store's in Guthrie. Guthrie is right off of Division Street there, headed into downtown. So, yeah, come on.
Sweet. Love Guthrie. It's a great spot. Great. Well, mate, thanks so much for coming in. Appreciate you sharing stories. Can't wait to pop out and see you play. I need to either come down to the Opry or see you at O-Bar next time you're out there.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
And so for people listening, we will catch you next episode.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at OklahomaHOF. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my 2 pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my 2 golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffees with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Banks, where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other. This episode is brought to you by the Oklahoma State Treasurer Unclaimed Property Division. Oklahoma has more than $1 billion of unclaimed property. Reclaim what's rightfully yours. Visit YourMoney.ok.gov and enter your name to find out if you have lost money from utility deposits, uncashed checks, life insurance policies, or more. If you've got a minute, search for free and visit YourMoney.ok.gov.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.